Hey, boo. The more I make content about manifesting, the more I realize that as we progress in our experience with being conscious manifestors and understand that we are the ones who make the law of assumption work as the operant power form of God, and that God is our very own awareness of being, the more I realize it's really, really important to have a stronger understanding of consciousness, and why Neville Goddard talked so much about it. Many of his most important quotes were related to the nature of consciousness itself. And consciousness, of course, we think of it, however we think of it, it is not something that we can see, but it is something that impacts every moment of our existence in our body. And that as you progress in your understanding, you see that consciousness, that your body is within consciousness. Consciousness is not in your body. Neville said, your present level of consciousness will only be transcended as you drop the present state and rise to a higher level, which is to say, letting go of your state of consciousness, your state of being that may not be serving you. If it's not working for you, you want to rise higher in the way that you see yourself. Neville also said man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness. And it was Neville who also said everything that arises, everything that befalls you, happens to you or through you, is caused by you, caused by what you have manifested it. So, and there's even another quote where he said, that which requires a state of consciousness to produce its effect obviously cannot be effected or brought into being or caused to happen without such a state of consciousness. In other words, without the state of consciousness relating to it. So if it needs a state of consciousness, it's a cause and effect situation. If it needs a state of consciousness to come into being, the state of consciousness is the factor that makes it happen. It's the driver. It's consciousness itself. So it can be challenging, absolutely, to have this understanding of what consciousness really, really is. And one of my viewers recently made a comment where they were talking about their desire jumping out of their head into the apparent outside world. And yes, it is an apparent outside world because really everything is in your reality is coming from within your consciousness. We see things as not as they are, we see things as we are. Everything is coming from what we're imagining, what we're adding meaning to, how we perceive it. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And that also relates to what is our state of consciousness. If we're in a good state of consciousness, a happy state of consciousness, a loving state of consciousness, we might see things very differently than if we are in an angry state of consciousness. So those are also important things to understand. They're important distinctions to make, is that the state that we're in is going to impact whatever it is that we perceive, whatever it is that our senses are telling us about or reporting to us. We may see something that looks like a fight going on, but it could really be a couple of kids just playing. It doesn't mean that there's anything, there's any problem, there's anything bad, but it's what our mind state, our state of consciousness in that moment is reporting back to us through our senses. And it's Bashar that said consciousness conceives and the mind receives and the senses perceive. This is just how it all boils down. It becomes more and more limited as it comes down into the physical form. So you can see how complicated it can start to seem, how complex it can start to seem in sorting it all out. And I wanted to show this to you in a way that's really very simple and kind of fun also. And this comes from a story from my Hindu studies, my studies in Hinduism, that discuss what consciousness really is, because it's not something that if you say this is consciousness, there's nothing touchy-feely about it, but consciousness is in everything that is touchy-feely, and this is how consciousness operates. Consciousness does not get divided up. This is why we talk about the one mind. Consciousness is not in little pieces all over the place. It's complete in itself. It's boundless. It's we say the one mind, that we have experiences of being on the same frequency with something because there is no barrier. There is no barrier here. The frequencies might be different where we don't understand one another or don't understand what's happening, because it could be happening on a higher frequency than we're able to take it in on. But at the same time, if we're talking about consciousness, it's one cohesive whole. And stick with me so you'll see exactly what this is like. So for instance, if we see consciousness as fluid, as all over in everything, and we take a plate and we say, okay, the consciousness, if you talk about consciousness, say, as you would talk about air, you would say the air in front of the plate, behind the plate, around the plate is the same air. The fact that there's a plate is not separating consciousness from consciousness. Consciousness is the perfection of God. This is perfect, that is perfect. If you take the perfect from the perfect remains. So this is not dividing consciousness, just seems like it is. The consciousness in front of the plate, like air, the consciousness behind the plate. Like you would say the air behind the plate and in front of the plate and around the plate, okay? But if you take this plate and, okay, here, and you break the plate, the air is still flowing. It's the same air. It didn't suddenly become released. It was always there. It just appeared to be broken up, whether you're talking about air or consciousness. It's the same. It's the same. It's all one, regardless. It's just an appearance that a broken plate has now made it all whole. Like if you have a pot full of a clay pot or a ceramic pot full of water, and you break it, yeah, the water's going to be all over the place. But that is not the same thing, because there you had it separated from everything around it. That's why it's different. If you're talking about air and you're talking about consciousness, is the same thing, or air is a symbol for consciousness, it's always there. Doesn't matter if the plate is solid or if the plate is broken. It's still one. And in understanding that more and playing with that idea that consciousness is always one, it's whole. That's why we know that the body is within consciousness. The mind is inside of consciousness. Because when the body no longer exists, consciousness is still there. The consciousness is there. And you could say whether you feel it's the individual's consciousness of the person who just transitioned, whose body no longer is alive, or of consciousness, the overall consciousness itself. It's always on, it's always there. Nothing can separate it from anything else. It's part of everything that is sentient. Anything that has sentience has consciousness, and that consciousness is always existing. So there's nothing different between anything that's behind it, behind something. Nothing that seems to contain. If you think of it like air, like in the analogy I just gave with the plate, it's sometimes told with a clay pot that the air inside the pot is the same as the air outside the pot, and you break the pot, and it's the one air. Nothing has suddenly appeared. It's always been one. And this is the truth about consciousness. It's always one. And this, understanding this and looking at this can help you to understand how you have an idea comes to you, or a desire coming to you in imagination, in your imagination. This is in consciousness. And then how it arises in the external world. And the only way it arises is because it's coming from you to you in essence, because what appears to be outside is really another aspect of consciousness. It's all in consciousness. It's all in your personal reality through your real personality. I was talking about that a few videos ago recently, and you can find that. It's not here on the channel. And that it's all there. There's no obstruction. So that when you have a desire and you want it to, you're imagining that it comes into your reality. That's how it's able to do. Consciousness is not having any barriers. The only barriers that can obstruct the divine, the God self, whether you call it source, the God self, universe, is when we believe we are separate. When we believe we are separate. And that feeling of separation brings on anxiety and doubt and worry and fear and what if. And we feel separate. And that feeling of separate is what is more than anything else the lower frequency of those doubting feelings, those negativities that make us feel separate and that believe us to be opposite or different. Believing in what's called duality, that there are opposites or things that oppose our desire that really aren't there, because there is only the unity, the one. So that's really my take on it, and on how this all works, and why we sometimes feel our desire is not happening is because we are existing in a lower frequency than the frequency that we need to have that unbroken relationship in consciousness, which is why Neville said your present level of consciousness will only be transmuted, gone beyond, transcended, risen above. That, in a sense, is what he's also talked about as your resurrection from above. And it will only be transcended as you let go of the present state that you're in, that lower state of consciousness. This is, I'm only this person, and I only have this much money, and I only have this kind of work coming in if I get it at all, and I'm only have this much education, etc., etc. And you drop that, and you must rise to a higher level, which is the one that says, there's no barrier to what I can have or be. If I imagine it and have faith in the divine, have faith in consciousness, that the greater consciousness, I and my Father are one, and my Father is greater. That's consciousness that brings your desire to you, unbroken, undivided. That is non-duality, as it's called. The oneness, the one mind, the one consciousness. And that is how you understand it as already being yours. There is no barrier there preventing you from having it. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so happy you have been here with me, And thank you so much for supporting my channel, for subscribing. And if this video resonated with you, for liking it and sharing it. And I will be back with you soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.